How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to be addressing a question that I got from somebody who came across one of my videos on overtraining. Apparently, the guy did not subscribe to me until after I told him to subscribe to me so that he could be notified of seeing this video. So he's got a pretty long couple paragraphs, couple walls of text here for me to read. And he believes he's suffering from overtraining syndrome. So we're going to read his story, and then we're going to break it down bit by bit and attempt to figure out what's actually going on here. Is it actually overtraining syndrome, or is it something else? Now, let me apologize in advance. My voice is pretty shot because I had a bunch of my fighters that I've been training. They fought yesterday, so I was screaming my ass off to try to motivate them to get the victory. So yeah, my voice is a little bit messed up. All right, so let's dive in. He says, I'm suffering from overtraining syndrome and would love to ask you some questions since there's so many mixed opinions out there. Yeah, there's mixed opinions because most people don't actually follow the scientific evidence. They don't actually understand the stress response. They don't understand how recovery and adaptation works. Most of them kind of just go off what they were taught in school. Unfortunately, that model is it's pretty much outdated. And we have a new model of fatigue, adaptation, and recovery as of at least the last decade that schools have not caught up on. Most people are just parroting what they've heard, or else they're just going based on symptoms rather than actually trying to determine the mechanism. So if anybody, if you've looked through any of my videos, like pretty much all my subscribers know, my information is extremely thorough, extremely nuanced, and relatively balanced, because pretty much all these topics that I talk about, I've dealt with myself, and I've studied extensively over the last 10, 12 years now. All right, so 25-year-old male, been playing sports since age 7, had a few injuries while playing soccer professionally, but nothing serious. Okay, doesn't really sound like somebody who has been training vigorously enough to induce overtraining syndrome by just that, but let's continue. Well, let me start by saying my training routine before getting overtrained was not your average training routine. I worked 2 jobs, one as a chef, one working from home, and was training. Okay, so I need to know what exactly you did working from home, because there's a lot of things you do working from home. And if I don't actually know what it is you did working from home, how am I going to factor that into the amount of stress that your body was under at the time? If it was just sitting around, well, that's not really contributing to your overtraining syndrome, or what you think is overtraining syndrome. So I was working from home, worked as a chef, and was training vigorously at least 5 times per week. Okay, 5 times per week is nothing crazy. Sometimes without any days off. Like, I know plenty of casual competitors in MMA and jiu-jitsu who train 6 or 7 days a week. 5 days per week with no time off is not really that big of a deal. If you have 2 days a week to recover, that's more than enough. But it also depends on what you're training for. I did this probably for an entire year. Okay, so a year of only training 5 times per week. That's not very vigorous. I felt great, had a ton of energy, and was happily fulfilled. And I honestly didn't even feel something weird was going on until it hit me. Okay? So this doesn't sound like overtraining syndrome, because overtraining syndrome doesn't just hit you. Okay? You don't just go from feeling great to feeling like shit. So I already have a pretty good idea of what actually hit him that causes symptoms, but we're going to continue. After it hit me, I realized that my body was highly drained and that I needed to rest as much as possible. Okay, you weren't feeling like that before it hit you. Okay, you only started feeling that after it hit you. Overtraining syndrome is something that gradually the fatigue builds up more and more over time, and almost always you experience at least nagging aches and pains in connective tissue, and especially prolonged muscle soreness. These are things that you generally, but not always, experience leading up to it. And this comes more so with volume of training rather than intensity. But intensity can cause problems too, but they usually go away after about 2 weeks of rest. When I say not your average routine, exercise routine, I mean it. Okay, I'm still waiting to hear your routine that's worse than average, that's more intense than average. I'm not going to bother you with many details. Well, I need more details. But the exercises I did were body weight plus high intensity cardio for the most part. So literally that just sounds like, okay, I'm going to continue reading. I was pushing myself constantly, and I got to a point where I thought that doing 1,000 squats on a leg day was a decent training session. Okay, so 1,000, I think he's talking about body weight squats. I'm sorry to break it to you, but that is nothing, and that is not enough to induce overtraining syndrome, even if you do it every day, because your body, if you don't feel, prolonged injuries and soreness, your body adapts to that. Overtraining syndrome doesn't happen from doing 1,000 body weight squats on a leg day. So he's saying a leg day, so it sounds like he's splitting it up. That's not enough to induce overtraining syndrome, believe me. I know plenty of people who have done routines like that. Now, if you're talking 1,000 squats and you're doing them weighted, well, that's, whatever. But yeah, I would ask you why the hell you were, doing such a high volume of like body weight exercises. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but you probably should have started adding weights into your routine. Maybe kept this as like a volume day or something, and then added like a day where you're actually trying to improve force production through barbell exercises. But see, that's the thing. That's strength and conditioning science, not something that most people learn unless they've actually studied it. Even if people go to college, they don't learn how to actually do strength and conditioning properly. So, not a big deal. I said to myself that once I quit my job, I would try to hit at least 2,500 body weight squats, which is pretty crazy. Now I look back at it. So I'm just wondering, why the hell were you doing that much body weight squats? And also, you don't specify if you were doing 1,000 squats in one set or 1,000 squats just in multiple sets throughout the day. If you did 1,000 body weight squats without stopping, so I don't know why you leave out these details. Like, that's important. So if you did 1,000 body weight squats, and he said on a leg, are you talking about on one leg? So if you did that without resting, 1,000 body weight squats on one leg without resting in between sets, that I think is a Guinness World Record, and you should look into that and you should videotape it. Okay. I don't know if he did this in sets or not. I did ask for more details, which we're going to go into here in a little bit. But I don't know why, but I skipped over this. But I'm pretty sure he didn't do 1,000 body weight squats on one leg with no rest in between sets. If he did, he needs to get a world record. He needs to get the Guinness record people over there and record that shit. Especially if he said he's going to try to hit 2,500 body weight squats on one leg, okay? So if you did 1,000 body weight squats on one leg, okay, and you probably broke them up into sets. You could have done 10 sets of 100 body weight squats on one leg, okay? If you broke it up into sets, that is not enough to induce overtraining syndrome at all. That is not even so intense that it's not your average, it's above average. Trust me, okay? So, and I hope I probably sound condescending. I'm sorry. I'm speaking with passion and intensity as somebody who's been a personal trainer since 2013 and a strength and conditioning coach since 2016. And like I said, I'm training fighters right now. I just had them fight. And I myself have been training pretty vigorously for a long time. I'm telling you right now, 1,000 body weight squats, if you do sets of 100 on one leg, that's not some kind of like superhuman shit to induce overtraining syndrome. That's really not. So I just have to emphasize that because, like you said, there's so many people out there giving different opinions and whatnot. And they'll tell you, oh yeah, that's overtraining. You know why they say that? Because they don't actually study athletes like I do. They don't train athletes, even if it's a sports medicine doctor. Okay, they're like, oh shit, 1,000 freaking squats on one leg, because they've never seen someone do that. They don't know what that's like. It's really, so of course, you're overtraining, bro. You're done. You're toast. Good luck recovering. Yeah, you got to be very careful. Most of these doctors that people go to, they might say, oh, I train and shit. But especially if the person, if like you yourself as a patient don't understand strength and conditioning, and you go to a medical professional, a sports medicine doctor, who also doesn't understand strength and conditioning, even if he says he does, he probably doesn't actually study strength and conditioning. He probably knows the shit that they teach in college, which isn't that great. And they'll see something like this and think it's some otherworldly shit when it's really not. It's a huge problem. It's really, really sad, because most people won't believe me saying this either. Anyway, I wasn't doing any light sessions, he says. I know people who do 100 body weight squats for sets or 10 to 20 sets of 100 body weight squats, and they call that a light session. I know people who do, sets of 100 burpees, or usually sets of 50 all the way up to 1,000, and they call that a light session. I have a client right now. He's the head coach of a gym that I'm working at, MMA gym, and he's old, but we're working him up there. Right now, he just started, and I had him start doing 100 total burpees in sets of 25, and now he's doing 200 total burpees in sets of 25. I mean, he's going to adapt, and eventually, in like 6 months, he'll be able to do sets of 25 to 50 up to 1,000 total burpees on his rest days. So, yeah, this just sounds like somebody who doesn't understand strength and conditioning or how the stress recovery adaptation works. And again, I'm not trying to be condescending. It's important to emphasize that, because if you believe that you are overtrained, you will nocebo yourself into thinking you're overtrained. So let's continue. Initially, I had no idea that what was happening to me was overtraining. It's probably because it wasn't. At first, I felt like I was dying and had some severe disease. But after visiting a physiotherapist, okay, physiotherapists are generally full of bro science. I was diagnosed as overtrained. Okay, so let me hear the test that he did on you. Okay. One of the best physiotherapists in Dublin. Okay. Not a sports medicine doctor even. Diagnosed him as overtrained, without actually doing a cortisol to testosterone ratio test, which is the only test we have that can even come close to diagnosing overtraining. And just so we know in advance, overtraining syndrome has only been seen in marathon athletes, okay? You don't see overtraining in people who are just doing a couple of hours of bodyweight exercise a day, no matter how intense you think it is, 5 days a week with rest days, okay? It's really not that intense. I haven't heard anything that's intense enough to induce overtraining syndrome yet. Really, the guy just did 1,000, single leg squats a day. That's not that much. Especially, and you were feeling great until you probably got a viral infection. Is probably what happened. Okay, just throwing it out there. Okay, viral infections just hit you like a ton of bricks, and they take time to recover from. Okay, overtraining syndrome doesn't just hit you. There's lingering symptoms, and usually people who have overtraining syndrome can take a look back and they could see, and it makes sense. This is not overtraining syndrome. The first 4 months were awful. Okay. And yeah, so that physiotherapist who diagnosed you, he didn't give you a test. And if he did, you should have told me. Testosterone to cortisol ratio. That guy shouldn't be considered the best physiotherapist in Dublin who just diagnosed you as overtraining without testing you. That's irresponsible. It kind of irritates me a little bit. I hate professionals who just, you have overtraining syndrome, or you have, this disorder, you have, whatever. I hate when they diagnose you with shit and they haven't even found anything on the test. That's so freaking lazy and irresponsible. This guy probably has a freaking viral infection. He's over there dying. Listen to these First 4 months for me were awful. Felt like I was dying. I had symptoms, severe body aches, mainly on my back and through my entire body. I was waking up every night at around 5 a.m. in severe night sweats. Anxiety and depression lasted 3 to 4 months. Heart palpitations, fatigue, mood swings, tingling sensation in his penis, he says. Bro, and your doctor just lazily diagnosed you overtraining syndrome. And he didn't tell you to go to a primary care physician or someone who can, a real doctor, okay, as in someone who can actually who can actually test you for viral infections. You're over there dying for 3 to 4 months. And you went to this guy who you call the best physiotherapist in Dublin. And the guy didn't actually test you. Oh, you have overtraining syndrome. Bro. I'm laughing because this is horrible. This is horrible. I don't think ironic is the word. This is horrible. This is fucking horrible. It took me 5 months just to start feeling normal again. It sounds like an untreated viral infection. Now I asked. Now I'm going to continue with the messages. I asked this guy about his diet. You could have also just been under eating sodium. Okay, there's an article by Phinney. I'll have to link it. I'll have to link the article. God forbid I don't link it because I actually got to get out of here and get my own training in here after this. But I got to link that. I have a video where I actually I address one of my subscribers. He was bedridden for over 10 years after, because he was like a professional soccer player too. What is it with you soccer players? And he had crippling chronic fatigue syndrome or overtraining syndrome where he was bedridden for 10 years. But he followed my nutrition advice, and he says he did no FAP and that helped. But I think he had a nutritional deficiency. He started eating liver and meat, and all of a sudden he was able to get off disability because he was bedridden and start walking and actually working a normal job again. So, and a physiotherapist is not going to be able to identify, oh, you probably are deficient in vitamin A, which is probably what this other guy had. So I'll link that video so you could hear. It is very common for people to have crippling problems that look like overtraining syndrome, and then turns out their actual cause of their problems was very, very simple. All right. It took me 5 months to start feeling normal again. Okay. That routine you had, and then 5 months to make you start feeling normal, that doesn't make sense, okay, without symptoms leading up to it. Typically, you'll have pretty bad insomnia, you'll have body aches, you'll have muscle pains, you'll have connective tissue pains. And another thing is, and these things leading up to the overtraining syndrome, typically I'll explain it here in a second. But you'll have a lot of these symptoms, especially sleep problems. You'll have fatigue. You won't be able to do your normal 1,000 body weight squats or whatever if you're overtraining. Your performance will take some time to go down, actually. But eventually, especially with endurance type stuff, your performance would go down. You would start to have trouble doing those 1,000 squats. You would know if you're overdoing it. It doesn't just hit you, okay? And I'll explain how overtraining and all that shit works here in a bit. When I say I got back to normal, I mean that my anxiety and depression were gone, but I was still in a lot of pain. Yeah, you probably had a viral infection and probably had a nutrient deficiency. It's probably what actually happened. Especially if you're exercising vigorously for a year, you probably got depleted in some nutrient. 9 months have passed since my first body ache, and you could say that I'm nearly my full self now. Still got a lot to go. I still feel that my back aches sometimes, but the pain is far more tolerable and less intense. So back aches, you know what? Back aches, you'd be surprised. Pretty much every client I've ever had said they have back pain, and it's just general back pain. And there's a really good like lecture on that by a YouTube channel called Barbell Medicine. Let me tell you this. I've been a personal trainer for over 10 years for the general population. Well, yeah, something like that. Yeah, about almost 10 years now for a general population. All of them came to me with back pain. You know what helps everybody with their back pain? You're not going to believe this because you want to believe your back pain is more complicated than it actually is. If you do a dedicated stretching routine where you hold each stretch for 1 minute minimum, okay, and actual strength training, not your body weight nonsense. Sorry, body weight training can be great, but if you actually do full range of motion paused barbell squats and Romanian deadlifts with a light enough weight to just get a good active stretch, your back pain will go away completely. Okay? But people don't want to do the strength training. They think it's going to hurt their back and make it worse. And then no one can just sit down and do a dedicated stretching routine. That requires too much attention and focus. Let's see. But I'll tell you, if you do a real good stretching routine, you hold each stretch for a minute minimum every single day. Okay? Just like I told my other subscriber who was bedridden for over 10 years. And then you do a proper strength training routine. And no one knows, it's so hard to do proper strength training nowadays because you get too much stupid fucking advice from dumbass people that are on steroids or whatever. I'll have to do a whole video on that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm irritated at the fitness industry and the health industry. And the best physiotherapist in Dublin telling this guy he had overtraining syndrome without doing tests. This shit pisses me off. Not you, sir, but the physiotherapist who diagnosed you. It irritates me because you don't know without a cortisol testosterone ratio test, and even then the science doesn't. I'm going to get into the science here in a bit. Here are some things I did recovery-wise. Sleep as much as possible. Drink a lot of water, at least 6 to 7 liters a day. So that's a lot of water. If you're drinking that much water, you need to make sure you're eating enough salt because sodium deficient, you're not going to see it on a blood test, but if you're under eating salt, all of those symptoms, fatigue, insomnia, night sweats, those things happen to me if I start to undereat salt. Heart palpitations are a huge symptom of low salt intake. And if you stop exercising for 5 months, then your water will regulate. But then once you start exercising vigorously or go out in the heat, you'll start having those problems again because you start to waste sodium. So, yeah, my fighters dropped 20 pounds in 7 days leading into this fight, by the way. All just by drinking 2 gallons of water for a couple days and then lowering their water intake slowly. Okay, when you drink a shit ton of water, you actually trigger your body's hormones, aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone, to start wasting water and dehydrating you. So it's not a good thing to drink more water than you need. Okay, that actually fucks your recovery up. Eat as healthy and balanced as possible. Many veggies, meats, fruits, vitamins, etc. Okay, stop taking vitamins, guy. Stop taking vitamins. Sorry, I'm speaking very intensely just because I know you haven't seen my other videos and stuff, so these are some of the basic things I've been preaching for a long time. I dive deep into the scientific evidence behind these things. It's common crap that's spewed by a lot of experts that don't know what they're talking about. Don't eat extra vitamins because these things can actually cause the very symptoms that you're dealing with, okay? You don't need to take vitamin supplements, okay? And eating more vegetables is not necessarily conducive to health, and it's not going to boost your energy, okay? Again, I have videos on this. Now, meat and fruit is a good idea, okay? Now, I'm going to get into the dietary causes of this guy's problem here in a bit because it revolves around not eating enough meat, I'm sure. Okay. He did foam rolling and massages. That's good for relieving pain and getting you, kind of feeling good for training, but not so good for, preventing or recovering from overtraining syndrome. Only work one job from home. Stress less. Okay, that's good. But if you're not moving, you're just going to feel pretty achy because you need to keep up the working. Basically, when you take a break from training, you detrain yourself, and your body's adaptation goes down. I can train again now, but I don't even feel like increasing intensity. I'm starting to build up slowly. Okay, this message is taking a long time, so I'm going to kind of just speed it up. Honestly, I'm kind of scared and try to give my body at least one good year of light to medium exercise and rest to heal. I want to ask you a few questions, if that's okay with you. Have you overtrained yourself? Yeah, I thought I was overtraining. Believe me, my training was way more intense than yours. And it turns out I was actually just drinking too much caffeine, and I wasn't moderating my intensity well enough. But I actually had lingering signs of overtraining that you didn't have leading up to your problem. I think you had a viral infection. I don't think you were overtrained. The other thing is, it sounds like you were doing pretty much the same routine over and over again. Your body probably adapted to the routine a long time ago. If you're only doing 1,000 bodyweight squats a day and you weren't progressively overloading and doing more weight or more reps, your body adapted to that shit a long time ago. So you definitely weren't overtrained, but your body wasn't getting any better by just doing the same shit over and over again. If you did overtrain, how long did it take you to go back to normal? I thought I was overtrained for a couple years. It didn't go back to normal until I actually studied fitness versus fatigue, which is a two-factor model of adaptation, and understand how adaptation works. And really, I didn't start to go back to normal until I started to learn how to actually train properly, and I wasn't just winging it and doing stupid crap. Until I started realizing how to make progress and programming my strength and conditioning properly. Because I wasn't overtrained, I just wasn't training properly. And I was drinking way too much caffeine. And I was under-eating protein. And spoiler alert, you're probably under-eating protein because you're not tracking your food. So kind of not really smart to go through all this crazy stress without actually learning the fundamentals of stress recovery adaptation and understanding how to eat to promote recovery. How old were you and what was your involvement in sports? Before you got overtrained, I wasn't overtrained. I thought I was, but I wasn't. My mom said I was doing backflips in the womb. They got me out of her womb, and I was like tangled up in her umbilical cord, according to the doctors. I basically was an athlete for most of my life. The only time that I didn't exercise was from like the age of like 9 to like 13, because I was on a bunch of pharmaceutical medications that made me a zombie, basically, and I got fat. But then after that, I started exercising every day, and the legend continues. And I've been doing mixed martial arts, including full contact kickboxing and grappling, since like 2012, on a regular basis. I've been lifting weights, doing high intensity cardio since like 2012, and I was doing BMX and skateboarding and all sorts of shit since I was like 13 before that. Did you start exercising when you were a teen? Yeah. How long has it been since you got overtrained? Look, you're not overtrained. I thought I was, and as long as I thought that I was overtrained, it hindered me. Do you believe that overtraining is reversible? You're not overtrained. You never even got a test that actually proved that. I don't know what to believe anymore. Some say that you can get your body back to normal, while others say it might be fully reversible. Look, if you are not a marathon athlete, you are not overtrained. And if people are telling you that you're overtrained and this and that, they're just trying to make videos for clicks, and also it's a miscommunication. I'm going to explain everything here in a second. What do you think? Did any supplements help you? Yes. Proper cordyceps extract by hairpin herbs, pine pollen. And just eat enough protein is all you really need. Just eat enough protein. I've heard that taking N-acetylcysteine and melanin is a good thing. Okay, so you're not talking melanin, you're talking melatonin. And no, don't take melatonin. Okay, even if you have sleep problems, get your sleep hygiene on check. N-acetylcysteine is good. It's a miracle supplement. FDA is trying to ban it. I wouldn't recommend you taking it, though, especially for adaptation, because it might blunt the adaptation response. I actually have some laying around here somewhere, though. What helped you the most? Learning how to actually train properly and not doing stupid shit, and also understanding how the recovery and adaptation actually works. Oh, shit. I keep accidentally doing emojis. I apologize. How are you feeling confidence-wise? How are you feeling confidence-wise? I'm feeling very confident now that I actually understand stress recovery adaptation and fitness fatigue rate model. And by the way, you can actually look at the YouTube channel of the shirt I'm wearing, Renaissance Periodization, and listen to their videos about the stress recovery adaptation and the overtraining and all that. Okay, you'll learn a bunch. You really should, and follow their nutrition advice too. Can you get your body back to what it once was? I got my body way better than it ever was because I actually learned how to train properly. I wasn't making improvements back then, and neither were you if you're doing the same routine over and over again. I've seen cases where people quit sports for good, while there are other cases where they've come back and broken their PRs. Yeah, but it depends on what you mean by PR. If they're marathon runners, which you were not, that's a different story. You're probably not a marathon runner who was overtrained, okay? Let's see. Tell me how exactly you think you developed overtraining syndrome. I just did 2 hours of high-intensity interval training over and over again, stayed at the gym for 4 to 5 hours a day because I had enough time to do so at the time. I lifted weights to max intensity every single day, basically maxing out on deadlift, squat, and clean and jerks, and I didn't eat enough sodium. I drank way too much fucking water, and I drastically undereated protein. And I was drinking 500 to 600 milligrams of caffeine a day, and I wasn't sleeping well, probably because of all of that shit. I felt like absolute garbage, okay? And I did that shit from 2016 all the way to 2018. And I didn't start to feel better till I started to focus exclusively on Olympic weightlifting, cut out all the high-intensity interval training, changed my caffeine source to coffee, and I started to eat like 3 grams of protein per pound of body weight, which is actually a lot. Okay, I started feeling like a god when I did that. Okay. I also forgot to mention I did a few tests, blood, urine, heart, etc., and they all came back normal. You didn't have overtraining syndrome. You didn't have rhabdomyolysis because you did a urine test. Okay, if you didn't have rhabdo, okay, and then the tests you did probably weren't even like good enough for overtraining. You didn't do a testosterone to cortisol ratio, but yeah, you weren't overtrained. Okay, that physiotherapist sent you down a rabbit hole of nocebo effect. Okay, so let's see. And then I asked him to give me more details, in particular, how many miles a week did you run, etc. He said, I was averaging 6 training sessions per week. I had a 3-day routine, push, pull, legs, rest, repeat. I usually warm up by jumping rope and doing 6 to 8 rounds of shadow boxing. Like, shadow boxing, but do you even do martial arts? I stretch properly in that, of course. Well, I don't know what you mean by stretch properly. You think you're stretching properly, but you're not giving me details on your stretching routine. So it's very possible you weren't actually stretching right, okay? I stretch properly in that, of course. What does that mean? What do you mean stretch properly? What kind of stretching did you do? For each muscle group, I do about 6 to 8 exercises. And I also use bands for explosive movements. Okay, so I need to know what your exact routine was, okay? So far, I don't hear anything that is like so intense that you like almost die for 5 months of overtraining syndrome. Seriously. All of this is done with high intensity. I did mainly calisthenics. Like everyone that I know that are at a high level of calisthenics do way more than this. Pull-ups, push-ups, explosive movements, squats, etc. I was also commuting to work with a bicycle around 10 kilometers, usually 6 to 7 times per week. Okay, so your body's not just like fragile to where you keep doing the same thing over and over again and it gets worse at it. You're basically, the more often you do the same routine, the better and better your body gets at it. And so your body adapts. The more your body adapts to a routine, the less recovery resources are required to recover from that exercise. So your body actually requires less recovery the more often you do something. So you don't just do the same 1,000 bodyweight squats, whatever, every day for a whole year, do the bicycle ride and all this for a whole year, and then suddenly develop overtraining syndrome. No, actually what happens is your body becomes more and more used to that training to the point where that exercise is no longer a stress. And at that point, overtraining syndrome is not going to fucking happen. It's literally just like another day in the office. So, yeah, this is not overtraining syndrome. I ate as much clean, healthy food. I hate nebulous terms This is not helpful when you say, oh, I did push-pull legs, calisthenics, blah, blah, blah. I need to know the reps and the sets. I need to know how you were progressing. Okay, just tell me you did 1,000 body weight squats total per day doesn't help. Do you do those in sets? How are you progressing? How long had you been at that threshold? I ate as much clean, healthy food as possible, but also treated myself occasionally with some junk food. That doesn't say anything. That doesn't help me. What do you mean clean, healthy food? That means nothing. And pretty much everybody thinks they're eating clean and healthy. I'm eating freaking salads and meat. I'm healthy. No, that doesn't say anything. And salads isn't really healthy. The word healthy doesn't actually tell me anything. So I still am waiting for like exact details on your diet and nutrition. But I can tell you how nebulous meaning how open-ended this is. You probably weren't tracking food. You probably weren't eating enough protein. You probably had a nutrient deficiency because you're just eating clean, healthy food. That's a problem everybody has, by the way. I was trying to eat as much protein but didn't actually count. Why are you doing all this other... You're going crazy, thinking you have overtraining syndrome after 5 months and you didn't even attempt to track protein and track food? That's a huge problem. That is the number one reason why people run into problems like this, is they just wing it. They're like, oh, I'm just going to eat whatever. I'm just going to do whatever exercises. That's what I did. And I felt like garbage until I started counting protein. Once you start counting protein, you get enough protein every day, it all changes. I've had so many clients who try to train hard as fuck, and they're under eating protein. And they think they're eating enough. They're like, yeah, it was like, I ate like some fish for dinner and a steak for breakfast. Like, yeah, and then you actually ask, you have them count. It turns out they're eating like not even half the amount of protein they should be eating. And they have insomnia. They have all the same freaking problems this guy ran into. These are symptoms of under eating protein, from what I found. I also got hit hard by the virus 1 year before feeling my first overtraining syndrome. So, I mean, yeah, I've had clients that got hit with COVID and they recovered within a couple weeks. And they had severe symptoms, but only 2. Most of my clients were asymptomatic because they're actually following my nutrition and diet advice. What do you think's happening? You're under eating protein and you don't know how to train or eat. That's what the fuck happened. And you might have gotten hit with some other virus. You could have had fucking COVID. But I'm sure you got tested. I also didn't log the foods I ate. I mainly ate oatmeal, all kinds of fruits, all kinds of vegetables, all kinds of seeds. Why the fuck are you eating seeds? Seriously. Pasta, fish, occasionally red meat, cheese, dairy products like milk, yogurt, blah, blah, blah. So he thinks he's eating healthy because he's eating fruits, vegetables, seeds, pasta, and fish. Okay, here's what you need to do if you want to feel better. Eat 2 pounds of red meat a day. Get all your carbs from fruits. And then all that extra shit that you say you eat, vegetables, seeds, pasta, which I would cut out the pasta and bread, all that extra shit that doesn't actually contribute to your fucking nutritional intake, let that be a second part to your diet. If you eat 2 pounds of red meat a day, and salmon too is okay, that alone, if you would have been doing this before, would have stopped you from having this problem. If it is a so-called overtraining syndrome, you're under-eating protein is what it is. Okay, your body can't sustain your amino acid pool long enough. Now, if you got hit with a viral infection, none of this shit would have helped. Well, I could tell just by the way you're talking about food that you're prioritizing the wrong foods, and that's why you feel like shit. You want to know my diet for the last 4 years? Minimum of 2 pounds of red meat a day. Occasionally, I'll target honey around my workouts. And sometimes I'll eat fruit, and sometimes I'll do stints where I eat a lot of jasmine rice around training. But usually I just eat red meat, a little bit of honey, and some fruit, and liver. And before that, I was eating a diet that sounded like yours. I would eat a pound of greens a day, broccoli, cauliflower. I would eat a shit ton of rice, and I'd eat like a half a pound of meat a day. And I always felt like garbage back then. So yeah, I'm going to make another video where I specifically just run down the science of overtraining and shit like that, because I'm not just talking out of my asshole, okay? It's very complicated, but I can explain everything. But basically, here's your problem. You don't understand stress recovery adaptation syndrome. You don't understand what overtraining is. You don't understand overreaching. And please don't take this as condescending. You don't understand overreaching. You were not eating just the basic athletic performance diet that you need to eat, which is prioritizing protein first, not from plant sources. If you really want the highest magnitude of effect for recovery and sports performance, prioritize animal protein, whole animal protein. You probably had a nutrient deficiency like this other guy that I was talking about. You probably needed to get a real training program where you're actually progressing and not doing the same thing over and over again to where your body's already adapted to it. No way in hell you're getting overtraining syndrome from doing the same thing you've been doing. And just 1,000 body weight squats, even on a single leg. If you're breaking that up into sets, is nothing. If you're doing it all in one, like, that's incredible. And yeah, so I'm going to make a whole nother video because I'm running low on time. But this is just the basics. I got to fucking go and get my own training in and train my clients. And then I got to go to my fighters' MMA gym. And we got to talk about their fight performance from yesterday and get some training in. So, yeah, I'm going to make another video where I go into detail on all of this. And again, I hope I wasn't condescending, but hopefully this helps people kind of understand this. One more thing I'll say is, like, in the scientific literature, we have many different studies that actually try to induce overtraining syndrome using resistance exercise. Over and over again, we find zero signs of overtraining syndrome in every method tested interventions with resistance exercise. That includes body weight. In marathon runners, rarely do you see overtraining syndrome, believe it or not. But when you do, it is in competitive marathon runners that are purposely restricting their caloric intake and trying to cut weight for the competition. And they are running like, how much was it? Like well over 100 miles a week. Like, that's nothing. I think it was, I don't remember the threshold. It was like over 200 miles a week total. Something like that. And they're drinking a shit ton of water, which, by the way, there's a whole book written about that called Waterlogged that can explain their so-called overtraining syndrome. So you're not overtrained, okay? I'm going to make a whole nother video talking about the science here in a bit. All right? Talk to you guys next time.